Of course, always. Railway Conversations with Doc Frank.
Hello and welcome back to the show. Andy Harrison is back on the podcast. In a previous episode, we found out that we both have a great liking of an outstanding book on project management, which is called How Big Things Get Done by Professor Ben Flyvbjerg and Dan Gardner. And in this episode, we talk about this book. I haven't yet managed to get Ben Flyvbjerg himself on the show, still working on it, let's wait and see. But I think the next big thing, rather than talking to himself about the book, is to talk to another intelligent, very knowledgeable person like Andy about this book. And I'm sure you will find this episode greatly insightful. Please enjoy. Hi, this is Doc Frank from the studio. I want to inform you about my latest and greatest training development, and it is all about the mindset of a high capacity railway organization. What I found in my experience of training and consulting is that often you have projects for new technology which seem to be perfectly planned, which are very well executed, and they still don't lead to the success that was expected. And very often the reason for that is mindset. Key stakeholders that have what I call a legacy mindset, an outdated old ways of thinking where the new technology is treated in the same way as the old one, but it's just not suitable to get the most out of the new technology. This course, which is called High Capacity Railway Mindset, provides you with weekly training modules over 12 weeks. Each module has a lesson with 5 examples of a legacy mindset, the potential issues with that, an alternative expression from a high capacity mindset that is more suitable for the new world with the new technology, and suggestions how to adopt such a high capacity mindset. Every module also includes a second lesson called Transformation Guide, which provides you with more general tips and tricks how to change your mindset or anything else you might want to change in your life. So in total, the entire training offers 60 examples of a shift from a legacy mindset to a high capacity mindset and 12 transformation guide lessons. This is not only the most comprehensive training on this topic, it is the only training worldwide at the time I record this for you. You can watch all lessons on demand whenever it suits you, from where you prefer, and as often as you like. And then you have the usual service of an alumni community afterwards where you can ask ongoing questions for at least 12 months after the training. You find more information and you can sign up on my training portal docfranktraining.podia.com/mindset. I hope I see you at this training. It's really leading edge stuff. Nobody else in the world is training on this. And if you really want to explore the ultimate frontier of success in technology projects, then this is the training you need to take. Andy, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Frank, it's good to see you. Thanks for the invitation.
I was looking very much forward to today's episode, and I want to give a little bit of an introduction for the listeners. The last time we spoke, it was about High Speed 2 in the UK, the high-speed rail project between London and Birmingham, and then the rest that was truncated. We also talked a bit about high speed in Australia, and both of these undertakings certainly qualify as what you would call mega projects. And that reminded me of a book that I've recently read. And then you said, well, I've read the same book. And then we came up with the idea or with the agreement that we want to talk about this book. So the title of this book is How Big Things Get Done. The authors are Professor Ben Flyvbjerg from Oxford and Copenhagen, probably flying in, flying out. And Dan Gardner is the co-author. I will put a link in the show notes. I think you've got a hard copy there. So if you wanted to hold it up, there we go. This is how it is. All right,
There
good.
we go.
So, and I found this book quite fascinating, and apparently so did you. But I could well imagine that we found different parts of the book most intriguing, because obviously everybody looks at it with their own filters, with their own background, with their own experience. So, where do you want to start? What was there one thing that you took away from that stuck with you more than anything else?
I think there are lots of things in this book that I found absolutely fascinating, if I'm honest. And I mean, it's quite a sweet story for me if I'm brutal, which I'll bore you with, and you can decide whether you keep this in the show later. But for those of you who follow my very very occasional posts on LinkedIn, they're mostly to do with music, and my wife Gabby has a foundation which focuses on women in music. So last November, she was working with a colleague to perform a show at the Jacqueline du Pré Music Centre in Oxford, part of St Hilda's College. And so we drove up to Oxford in the afternoon, and the guys wanted to rehearse. So I made a beeline for my go-to place in Oxford whenever I have a free hour, which is Blackwell's Bookshop, opposite well, Blackwell's Bookshop in the middle of town. And there's a wonderful room downstairs called the Norrington Room, which is full of all sorts of interesting books. So I'm wandering around the Norrington Room in the afternoon, late afternoon, and I'm wandering around the project management section, which is very sad of me, I know. And I come across this book, and it's bright orange, which always reminds me of you, curiously. So it's bright orange, and I pull it out, and because I'm an engineer, I get interested, and I start at the back, and end up reading the heuristics for project success, that I think Bent calls it. And I thought, oh, actually, this is quite interesting. So then I closed the back and started at the front. And an hour later, I'm still stood in the Norrington Room reading this book. And then I suddenly looked at my watch and thought, whoops, I'm going to be late for the concert. So I quickly grabbed it, shot across to the cash desk, bought a copy, and then ran back down the road so that I could make the concert in time. And so I got roundly criticized by my wife for being late. And therefore, the book had quite my expectations had to be quite high, because if I was being criticized by one part of the family, it had to be worth it. And I have to take my hat off to Bent and to Dan, the authors of this. They produce something which is actually really readable, extremely accessible, and very, very relevant. You know, a lot of, as you said, a lot of mega projects around the world are generally funded by public money. And so when mega projects don't work the way we expect them to, it's the public purse that suffers as a result. And so some of the points that the guys are making in this book, and you know, funnily enough, I've got kind of other books from Oxford. You know, I remember the Oxford Handbook of Mega Project Management, which I'll kind of do that with, even though it might not look so good. And that's the inaccessible version of how big things get done. I'm quite taken with this. I think they've done a good job. And I think from our perspective, it's interesting because we've been working in projects for, oh, goodness, 30 plus years. You know, some smaller projects, some bigger projects. I mean, I'm fortunate enough to have been one of the tens of thousands of people that helped contribute to Crossrail. I've done work with government on major projects for infrastructure in the UK. And I'm also a high-risk project reviewer for the Infrastructure Projects Authority here. So I've had the good luck, if you like, to be an independent reviewer for schemes like HS2. So I've been across mega projects from a number of years, and I've seen good things and bad things. And I think what Bent's come up with is a little bit of a menu of good practice. I think is terrific. Now, that's a very long answer to your original question. The thing that struck me very, very, very early doors about this book was the idea that projects don't go wrong; they start wrong. And that's one of those things that you read and you just take a step back, because it's true. All of my experience with either initiating projects or being part of project delivery or helping to rescue projects at the end, it says that that's absolutely right. We set off with an over optimistic view of what we can achieve, an over optimistic set of costs, a plan that's not based on anything sensible. Very often a set of dates that are at the whim of either politicians or other civil servants, and and then we criticized the people who are delivering these projects for failing to hit the budget that was never set properly in the first place, missed the dates from a plan that was never agreed properly in the first place. I think it is as a sentence. I think it was just immense. Projects don't go wrong; they start wrong. And if you shift your thinking and say, well, actually, what we really need to do as a project delivery group of people, if you like, is to address that and to make sure that when we're putting business cases together for projects in the first place, when we're starting to do early works on projects, we're not delusional, we're not pessimistic, we're not optimistic, we're just realistic and seriously realistic. And Ben's got some great techniques that he talks about, like reference class forecasting and management of optimism bias and things like that really resonate. What was the point in there that really got you interested?
Well, one thing I would probably, well, I had a slightly different story to get to that book. I mean, when it comes to Bent, I must have slept under a rock, because I didn't really know about him until one of my other guests on the podcast really pointed me to it. Then I had a look, and I mean, he has authored a number of books. And for whatever reason, maybe because it was his latest bestseller, this one came up. So how big things get done. So I got myself the Kindle version to read it on the iPad, and when I opened it, I mean, he is not a transport person as such. So I thought it would be more general about project management and things that can go wrong and stuff like that. But then I opened the book, started reading the introduction, and it started right away with a railway example about the California high-speed project. So I thought that's interesting. So apparently he does have a link to transportation as well, and there are more examples coming later in that book. So that was definitely a promising start. And the one thing that will probably be stuck with me forever is the term frozen experience. And by frozen experience, meaning products that are proven. So his theory or his claim was that people can have experience, but this experience, the people that develop product and improve and refine products, they basically pour their experience into those products. And then at the end of the day, you do have a product which doesn't change anymore. So that's a certain state of the product. So it's like experience that is frozen into a product, into a certain state that you can use, that you can carry away, like a tub of ice cream, as long as you don't have it melting. And it kind of confirmed a lot of my dislike of experimental solutions, especially if I look at my area of specialty, which is the likes of CBTC and so on. Yeah. So whenever people try to improve something that has been already optimized for 30 or more years, that's normally a recipe for disaster, because the people who think they can improve it are normally not the experts in that technology. The experts have already spent the last decade or two optimizing it. No, the likes that come in from the sidelines and think they can improve it, they normally have no idea what they're talking about. But they think they have an idea that the entire industry never came to, and they try to improve an already optimized product. And by doing so, putting it to risk to really mess it up, yeah, or at least at the minimum to enter into a product development, into a product adaptation, which is always a risk, and the outcome often is really not worth the effort at all.
I think it's an interesting point. I think what Bent brings to this, and I've never met the guy. His reputation precedes him. Spent time with colleagues in the UK government who go to major project leadership courses, which Bent runs at the business school in Oxford, and speak extremely highly of him. Whether they come back any better at being able to manage mega projects is a different question. But the fact that there's a focal point for managing projects and improving management of big projects has got to be a positive. And I think where Bent has really done something special here is identifying a hole in kind of originally in data collection around projects. It's like, well, how many projects succeed? What does succeed mean? How many projects fail? So with his team in Oxford over many years, they've started to collect project data, and project databases now in the thousands. So there's such a rich variety of data to support the conclusions that he's drawing and some of the ideas he's come up with. And that to me puts this book and some of the other books which he and colleagues have written in quite a special place, because they're not just, Andy sat down one morning and decided he knew how to manage projects. This is stuff which is genuinely based on real world experience and real world data collection over many years, many industries and many sectors. And that gives it a veracity, a truth, if you like, that I think lots of other project management books don't have. And when you start to, I mean, the other point it made me smile about this was the more I started to read it, the more I thought, oh, Bent's become a systems engineer. I wonder when that happened. Because, the idea of, I think one of his wonderful phrases is, think right to left, start with where you want to end and then work backwards. Now, the standard approach for engineering projects is left to right. We sit down with the plan and we think, what are we going to do tomorrow? What's the activity that we do after that? How does this link with the other thing? And eventually we build up a plan that may or may not get to the end. Systems engineering is about thinking about the outcomes, breaking down into component parts, and then working out how to build those component parts. And, that seems to be a very important lesson within this book, the idea that you start with where you want to end up and you build backwards. And I think that's, again, that goes to me to the same place in me as projects don't go wrong. They start wrong. It's a truism, but it's a truism based on real life experience and real life data, and this idea of thinking about the outcomes first. In some ways, this goes back to the conversation that we were having about high speed a couple of months ago. When we were interested in clearly in the project delivery and the rest of it, but the place that I think we ended up, and an interesting place, was what's the benefit, what's the outcome that high speed rail is seeking to achieve, right? And so what's the economic benefit? What's the societal benefit? What's the benefit that this thing is trying to do? What's it trying to achieve? And therefore, create a project, build a plan that takes us to that outcome, rather than we need to start developing some stations, we need to start identifying some land, we need to start laying some rails. We do need to do all of those things, but we need to do them in a way which is driven by getting to the outcome first. And I think that's a really, really important part of this book, and something again that really, really hit me between the eyes. Think about the outcomes.
Yeah. I like it. I mean, you mentioned the huge database that Bent and his team has formed over the years, and the way to deal with this data could be very boring, like beating you to death with statistics. Or it can be, as it was in this book, very accessible. Yeah, so I'm definitely not a detailed data analysis kind of guy. What I found really, really good was that the tips and tricks that he mentioned are really very accessible. They are very understandable. There are some very good explanations in there why projects go wrong, and I come to one of this in a short while. But he doesn't let the reader hang out to dry. He actually, so if you say most of the things get done wrong in planning, I said, well, yeah, fine, okay, I accept that, but how to solve this? And he actually gives an example. He spends an entire chapter of having a planning example that he calls Pixar planning, which I thought, well, what is this about? And then I started reading, and I found it really quite fascinating, because he took as an example of this positive planning from Pixar, but not just saying, well, everybody should do it like Pixar does, but he basically comes from that concrete example of a animated movie company back to more generalistic terms, and said, okay, well, how can you apply the type of planning for Pixar when you're not shooting an animated movie, but when you actually want to build a high-speed railway, for example. And I found it very, very easy to basically go back and forth between those specific examples out of my own discipline, way out of my own discipline, coming back to my own experience, to my own lessons learned that I keep emphasizing, for example, in my training courses or so, and said, "Ah, see, not just that he's confirming, he also gives ideas and instructions almost how to fix this, how people could make it better," right?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think it's one of the real positives of this as a book, and I'm sure that the listeners are getting the sense here that this is, I buy books and contribute to other people's retirement funds all the time. I absolutely don't mind contributing to Ben's retirement fund. This is worth the money. Pixar planning I found to be fascinating because the the process that is describing, again, when did Bent become a systems engineer? We know through our experience that it's way, way, way cheaper to work out what you want to do, produce a decent set of requirements, model it, and come up with a way of actually delivering this thing conceptually before you start putting spades in the ground. We know that. That's exactly right. That's exactly what our engineering experience says. And the alignment, if you like, with what Pixar, well, the approach that Bent's calling Pixar planning is really, really clear. The idea of empowering teams to make decisions, to start with something that's quite high level, quite cheap to produce, if you like, bits of paper with pen and ink, and to walk through that process with colleagues, to get to get feedback early, to iterate, and to keep going through that process is essentially it almost feels like model-based systems engineering to me. We're building slowly, we're building without expending huge amounts of money, and we're getting a sense of how this thing is going to work, how the story is going to develop, how the music, how the words, but we're doing it cheaply and iteratively and flexibly. We're empowering people to go out and seek feedback from other peers and other people who've made successful Pixar movies to improve the story, the concept, if you like. And we're doing all of that so that by the time somebody needs to make a decision to press the go button, Pixar seems to have the absolute confidence that they know exactly how this production is going to go. There is no surprises. There are no surprises. They know how long it's going to take to produce, who they need to involve, and all the rest of it, because they've iteratively built this plan over time. And when they press the go button, that's the point where the money starts to flow. Now, I don't know about you, Frank, but I mean, I've worked on railway projects in the past where the emphasis has been to deliver something quickly. And I remember an electrification scheme once where people started digging holes and putting masts in the ground before the design of the electrification system was finished. And they did it for all sorts of what they considered to be reasonable reasons, which was we need to demonstrate progress, we need to start, we need to, yada, yada. But they did it knowing that there was an extremely high likelihood that at some point somebody would have to come along, pick that post up and move it 10 yards down the road and drop it into a new hole. So there was no sense of coming up with, an iterative design or going through an iterative design process to get to the point where actually implementing the scheme would be faster and more efficient, but it would take longer to start. And I think, that plays to something that's in Bent's book as well, which is, where politics sit in all of this. The political imperative to see progress is not necessarily consistent with the delivery and the efficient delivery of mega projects, because there is an awful lot of planning. I would love to get to the point where I started a project, having spent so long planning that I knew that there were no surprises left in this job. Really, or the surprises were, maybe COVID might have been a surprise or something like that. But there were no surprises in the actual technical delivery because we modeled this backwards, forwards, inside out. We planned for all eventualities. And that was that. We knew what we were doing. Now, railway projects don't run that way, for all the reasons I just talked about. let's make a start. Let's get people organized. We'll get people mobilized. We'll crack on, and almost we'll worry about the planning and the efficient delivery of this thing as we go. Pixar planning is a revelation, really, but it's systems engineering done well
What I
with
find
leadership.
what I find fascinating about this Pixar planning concept is the boldness or the preparedness to throw the parts of the planning away that turns out to be not right or that can be improved. And very often what we probably find in our industry, this is not happening. Yeah, because somebody said, okay, well, I commissioned a study or we did a reference design. Now we spent all this work on that reference design and now we've got to run with it. Yeah, we can't just throw even half of it away, let alone the entire thing, because somebody said, well, you can do that better. There's another approach that can lead to much better results. Yeah, you said no, but this option works as well, and so that's I think in the book it's called commitment fallacy, that people think they have spent an effort on a certain thing, on a certain interim result, and now they have to run with it. They have to stick with it. Yeah, and
Yeah, I agree. I think that it seems to me that projects are becoming. People will argue that projects have always been complicated, and I think in the round that's probably true. Mega projects have always been complicated. Bent talks a lot about the Empire State Building and the essentially lean manufacturing approach that the construction crews took to building the Empire State Building. I think now we're in a situation where mega projects are growing. They're bigger. They're more common. You see, the days of tens of billions of pounds or euros or whatever being spent on mega projects is far more common now than it used to be. And the degree of complication involved in delivering a project like that truly is immense. You need, I think, to be flexible when you're taking on that level of complication. Your mindset needs to be one that says, look, this is so complicated that we're not going to get it right first time. We're not going to get the right plan on day one. We're not going to get the right design on day one. We need to have a more flexible and iterative mindset to this. And there are some really interesting parts of the book, actually, that talk about the benefits of flexibility and iteration during the early and therefore cheaper part of delivering a project, which just to me, they're just sensible. It's almost, I can't really understand why we wouldn't do that as a matter of course.
Yeah,
Frankly. Yeah.
And I think well, we had this discussion previously on the podcast here, not necessarily with you, but I have been under a lot of flack where I said, well, why does it have to be a railway if you want to have like high-speed land transport in Australia? Why can't you look at alternative technologies such as maglev or maybe even Hyperloop? So why? Well, there's a clear explanation for that, because the achievable top speeds of those other technologies are higher than there will ever be for railway with a metal wheel on a metal rail connection. And if the idea was to compete with air travel in terms of speeds, of journey times, and so on, it is plausible to look at faster technologies that are available. Now, people may say, okay, well, Hyperloop is just not mature enough as a technology. And I would kind of subscribe to that, because honestly, in the last 10 years or so, there hasn't really that much development. But maglev is in existence. The airport link in Shanghai, for example, is a maglev project, and there are other countries now putting more drive to that topic. So I'm not necessarily saying, well, scrap the idea with railway, but what I am saying, and which is also mentioned in the book, is that solid planning should look at alternatives. It should look at alternative ideas that may be even a bit left field at times, either to come up with a potentially better solution that people didn't see at the outset, or at least to solidify the chosen solution by a qualified discarding of the other alternative options. And that's something I don't think has been done, at least not in a transparent way that they are like available to the public. And I think that's a criticism. And I've been in the same spot myself where I needed to look, being responsible for business case development, I needed to look at alternatives where I thought, well, that's not very likely that we will adopt this alternative. But anyway, it needed to be looked at in order to have a decent selection process that explains and solidifies the chosen preference. Yeah, because you didn't just forget about all the other alternatives. You did look at them all, and there were good reasons why you were choosing this option over all the other ones.
I think it's a really interesting point you're making, and I mean, we're not delusional people, so we live in the world that we live in. I think that, you know, if we're setting off on the route of mega projects, then I think we set off on the route of starting from the right hand side. What is the outcome that we're trying to achieve here? And you know, for high speed in Australia is more your bag than mine. But high speed in Australia, you may say, well, look, from an economic point of view, we want to support jobs growth. We want to support economic growth in particular areas. We want to provide a more sustainable solution for people traveling between major cities. There are all sorts of reasonable outcomes that you would look to achieve. And then I think where we need to be is to look back and say, well, you know, what are the options to achieve, to best achieve those outcomes? Now, the constraints in that kind of option analysis that you're talking about are, generally speaking, you know, there are constraints about the technology, there are constraints about novelty and uniqueness, and we'll talk about uniqueness in a minute. But then there are also political constraints, and you know, I think you have to live in a parallel world to say that political constraints don't exist. They clearly do. You know, I every time I see a politician in a yellow jacket and a hat, I just burst out laughing. It's almost a meme now. You know, I don't really understand the attraction. There's this idea of we're going to build infrastructure. It's like, well, yes, but let's build the right infrastructure. So the aim of the game is not to give you as a politician a photo opportunity. The aim of the game is that we're investing public money in the best way possible to achieve a set of outcomes which are in the best of the public interest. And so that optioneering, I think, is a really, really important part of it. And that's not just optioneering at the strategic level, it's optioneering at the detail level as well. And that's something that I think engineers are good at. The uniqueness thing is I find quite interesting in Bent's book. It's and it's something I smile because I hear myself say it sometimes, and then I have to mentally kick myself under the table and say stop. There's always this temptation, I think, to say, oh, you know, this project is unique. This project is absolutely unique. It's unique because we've never done it here before. It's unique because we've never used this technology here before. It's unique because this bunch of people have never dealt with this particular thing that we're doing. As I said, I do say that sometimes, and I really have to stop, because the reality is, and Bent is very straightforward about this, there's very little in this world that is truly unique. So, you know, an ETCS project in the UK, well, the first one, interesting. ETCS is not unique. Delivering rail projects in the UK is not unique. Delivering high technology projects is not unique. You know, there are lessons learned from all over the place that we could bring into play. So I might be making this up. I read the book a little while ago, but I think there's a phrase in there that basically says, if anybody tells you that their project is unique, either you walk away from them or you give them a good kicking and push them out the door, because they are not the people that you need on your project.
Yeah. It probably depends very much on what people focus on. I mean, you will always find things that make this project unique, and you already mentioned a couple of examples. Yeah, like we just awarded the contract for CBTC here in Perth, so it's the first CBTC project in Perth. Full stop. There's no arguing about this. So from that perspective, it's certainly unique because the Railway Authority here has never done anything like that. So that's a fair comment. However, if you don't focus so much on what's different from something else, if you focus more on what's similar to something else, is it the first CBTC project ever in the world? No, it's not. Is it the first time that the railway authority does a first CBTC project in their territory? No, it's not. So is it the first time that CBTC has been applied to a suburban railway rather than to a metro? No, it's not. So it's easier once you start looking for similarities. It's probably much easier to come up with a long list of similarities rather than with the 2 or 3 maybe differences that you could argue whether that makes the project different, at least for this specific circumstance.
I think that it's a nice example. I think that if you took that project in the round and you said and you started off in that position of saying, well, this is unique because it's Perth and it's the first of its kind. Okay, well, let's break this project down. Let's break it down. What does it involve? Well, it involves some design activities, it involves some development activities, it involves some civils design and construction, some structural design and construction, some electrical, yada, 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 some business transformation, some operational readiness stuff. Okay, so we break it down. Now, none of those things are unique. If you break them down again, the chances of finding real uniqueness are quite slim. So you end up then, and I think that's quite powerful, this idea of kind of systems breakdown and component breakdown, same in terms of project delivery breakdown. Again, Bent the systems engineer. So if you end up identifying where the real points of uniqueness are, so what is special about this? Maybe it's a set of ground conditions which are unique to the particular place that you're working that people have not faced before. Okay, well, they've not faced it before for rail, but they've probably faced it before for other construction activities. So there are always lessons to be learned. And I think that, I think 2 things. By breaking things down and really considering where the uniqueness is, I think firstly, it allows you to focus on the things which are genuinely risky, let's say, the known unknowns or the unknown unknowns, as Ben would call them. So being able to focus down on the things that are genuinely risky and then being able to give those things your real attention. But for the rest of the stuff which is not unique, then learn the lessons from other implementations, from the way other organizations deliver, from the way that other contractors deliver, and try and bring the best together early. And I think that's probably my lesson about uniqueness out of this. It's not sufficient to say an entire project worth billions is unique. That's not good enough. We need to work out what truly is unique about it, and then we need to manage the risks associated with the things that are at smaller level really unique. And that plays to a different part of the book where Ben and Dan are talking about risk management. Now, I was looking back to my career when I read that, and I was thinking, well, when have I ever seen risk management really done well? And I've seen risk management on probably on all projects that I've ever been involved with. People identifying risks, people identifying mitigations, and it's all a marvelous exercise around a table. And then we come back in another month and we say, well, has anything changed? And we add a mitigation and we get rid of a risk, and the risk becomes an issue. And we end up with this marvelous risk register that you can wave around and say, this project's managing risk. Well, it's not managing risk, it's managing a piece of paper. Risk management done well, and Ben would support this, I think. Risk management done well is, let's focus on the actions that are required to mitigate uncertainty. And let's actually focus on delivering those actions to genuinely mitigate uncertainty. And I think, if there's another lesson, another strong lesson from this book, it's, don't focus on risk management for the sake of being able to say, I'm doing risk management. Focus risk management on the things which genuinely make a difference. And that's quite hard to do. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but that is genuinely quite hard to do. And it's especially hard to do on complicated projects where the dependencies between different streams of activity and different technical systems and different people systems are really difficult to get your hands around. But the importance of doing it is really clear. I think the other point there that plays to this, though, is that what the thing that Bent would call his iron law of mega projects, which is, generally speaking, they all go wrong. And some of the statistics are just staggering. You kind of read it. I don't know about you. I read these things and I think, that can't be right. Is that really true? I think it's, I may be wrong here, but I think his figure was something like 0.5% of projects deliver either to time or to budget. Uh,
Time, budget,
I
and
don't think,
benefits. I think
yeah,
time and budget was 9% or something like that, and just one of the three criteria was, I don't know,
yeah.
less than half already. Yeah,
And you
I
look,
must say, when I read this iron law that you just mentioned, I was about to put this book aside. I was about to throw in the towel. I said, okay, well, if all the projects go wrong anyway, what chance has anybody got to do it better? Fortunately, the book then came around and said, okay, well, let's look at some examples how it does work or how it can work, and and uh, and towards the end, I mean, I mentioned the Pixar example, and there was another example coming up from my childhood, and that was the example of Lego. Of course, yeah. I mean,
yes,
who
yes,
hasn't
yes.
played with this magical little plastic bricks from Denmark? And maybe there's a coincidence why Bent, who's also from Denmark, mentioned Lego, or maybe not. Uh, one of the passages from the book that I highlighted while reading it just before an hour before the podcast today was the about the Empire State Building, which used this concept of modularization, of basically having almost identical designs for the different levels of the building. And he basically said, instead of building one building of 102 stories, the people were building 102 buildings of 1 story high each, and just slicing it on top of each other. And then there was a comparison with the wedding cakes, which is also done of relatively simple 1 story cakes that are just built on top of each other in order to come up with an impressive tower, that then hopefully keeps the shape, yeah, at least as long as somebody cuts it with a knife. Um, so this idea of modularization is really quite important, and so many people, especially in complex projects, they say, well, it doesn't work here. It doesn't work here. We're looking off a railway line. What kind of modularity can there be? But if you look at it closer, for example, if you have a suburban network, you may have something like, I don't know, 70 or 80 or even more stations. Is every station different? Really? Aren't there similarities? Can't you break it down into maybe 3 or 5 tops different types of stations where you said, yeah, well, this one has a little snippet on the side, but actually it looks pretty much like this standard model that you find in 28 other stations as well, and there is your
Yeah.
modularity. And then if you start designing one of those stations, and you design it properly, you plan it properly, you implement it, you test it, you learn from it, you learn from your mistakes, and then the same team that has got this learning, this growth of experience, can then do the next one of the same type with improvements, and the next one with further improvement. So the team really goes up on a learning curve, rather than having people doing a job once and then replacing everybody, bringing somebody else in, and then you've got a new team and they have to start again with the learning
That's it.
curve. And yeah.
Wow. I think this is I think it's a fascinating. So I'm just making a note of something I wanted to say. This is it's another fascinating part of this book, actually, if I'm honest. This the idea of modularization, and Lego is a fantastic example. I mean, we've seen the Empire State, as you say, they built the same building, they just built it 100 X number of times. Um, and I think the construction industry has got very, very good at this. Now, we talked a little bit on previous podcast about HS2. HS2 has got off-site concrete factories producing structural pieces and various other things off-site in an efficient, controlled environment to get good QA, which are then taken to site and installed. So the idea of modularity in construction is I think is very solid, and I think is well accepted. Um, I remember more in our field some years ago. Network Rail worked with a major signaling supplier in the UK to come up with some ideas around modular signaling. So different modules of a signaling scheme, essentially being able to be built and tested off-site, designed off-site, built and tested off-site, brought to site, plugged in, switched on, and some of the ideas around that were very, very solid. I think the challenge goes back to the conversation we had a little earlier about uniqueness. The challenge is about uniqueness, which is that modularity assumes that you can apply the same answer over and over and over again, and I think that requires, if you like, an education of the client and an education of sponsors within client organizations to say, you might think you want 100%, but actually a modular solution will give you 90% of what you need and at 10% of the price. Right, so that is a better solution. So you need to shift from this position of demanding, well, I'll call it user preference engineering, for want of a better phrase. You've got to shift away from that and move towards an acceptance of the benefits of modularity. I think there are some good steps in that direction. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Perth, for sure. The other thing that the little note I was making to myself was something which might make you smile. I was reading some while ago about the Olympics, and because the Olympics is on in Paris, and it's a big subject at the moment. So the idea of teams of people, teams of similar people, essentially up sticks and say, okay, we're the London Olympics team. Our job is that we deliver the London Olympics. After that, the same bunch of people get in their car and they go somewhere else, and we say we're the Rio Olympics team. We're going to deliver the Rio Games, because essentially it's the same project replicated somewhere else. So the environment is different and the languages might be different, but it's the same job. I wonder whether we'll ever get to the stage where somebody sensible turns around and says, every CBTC job is essentially the same job. So we're going to have the best team of people anywhere in the world. We're going to bring this team of people around and they're going to say, we're the team of people that will deliver CBTC for Perth. And when we've delivered it from Perth, we're going to get on a plane and we're going to go and deliver it in Ho Chi Minh City. And we've finished that, we're going to deliver it in Bangkok, because they are the people. And I think part of the group, I think part of the problem is that with what we do at the moment is that this assumption, if you like, that you can just couple a team of people together to deliver a mega project, and that team of people come together, they work really hard, and then they disappear. And maybe there's an idea of teams of people actually sticking together and moving through their career together to deliver essentially the same project in different places.
Yeah, I think there's a bit of a dichotomy here, where on the one hand, the railways want the best experts, the best specialists on the job, which would make a case for what you just said, a team of project delivery experts for certain types of projects, for example, communications-based train control, traveling around the world from project to project to project. Not necessarily an entire project team of 50 odd people, but maybe a core team of, say, 4 or 5 that can basically bring together other people and guide them and lead them and so on. On the other hand, every railway authority wants local content. So they want a local office to be built up. They want that the project manager lives in this case, lives in Perth for the next 10 years. Well, not everybody wants to live in Perth for 10 years. I mean, I like it here. I've lived here for more than 10 years, and I intend to stay around for a while. But not everybody does that, because people may have, family links back home, wherever that may be, overseas, in Europe or in America, whatever. And so it's not quite that easy. And if you have a project, as in this case, with a rollout duration of at least 10 years, possibly more than that, it's not that easy. The thing is, if a project like this could be delivered in 3-4 weeks, then this kind of delivery tourism would probably be more feasible. Yeah, because people can really fly in, they do their job for 4 weeks, and then they fly out to the next one. But I've said this before, the number of real experts, specialists in those technologies, they are limited. Even with the signaling suppliers, where you would expect the maximum conglomeration of these people that really understand the product and the technology very well. And there may be a high number of people with an above average understanding of the product, but the real top guys, they are very rare. You may have, I don't know, 3 or 4 worldwide, and then you look at the long reference list of the big mainstream suppliers. And I mentioned this before. There was one supplier out there with a reference list including London, New York, Singapore, Paris, Hong Kong, and Perth. Yeah, so where it's very, very easy to basically just fall down the food chain and
Yeah.
and be seen as less important. I mean, we
Yeah.
what we did here was doing our best to make the project more interesting. Yeah, we have in Perth we have awarded the rollout across the entire network, which with all the network extension currently going on will be 250 route kilometers. This is gigantic for a CBTC project on a global scale. And the outcome, I just posted about this on LinkedIn, the outcome of this was that all the major suppliers were basically jumped on the opportunity to bid for this thing and really put their A team in. I know some of the stuff that was brought over from overseas, really the specialists, the people that really knew what they were doing and talking about regarding cybersecurity, regarding, I don't know, installation, regarding CBTC design and all kinds of things. And yeah, but having this kind of expertise during a bid process for I don't know, a few months is one thing, but for a rollout period of 10 to 12 years, yeah, it's
I think
not
that,
quite that simple.
yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think that we're talking a lot about uh, some of the tools and the techniques. Bent talks about in his book, tools and techniques for better project management, and a lot of it is a lot of the tools and techniques work well in what I would call a traditional construction sense, typical construction project. And the challenge I always have with these sorts of things is you look at things and think, okay, well, how would that translate into my world? And my world is not typically about big mega project construction. It's signaling, it's control systems, it's computer-based equipment, and all that kind of stuff. So how does that translate into my world? I think if we're looking at trying to improve the way in which we deliver projects through things like modularity, things like proper risk management and focusing on real unknowns, then I think part of this is also to look at whether or not the way in which we deliver with people is actually the right way. Because if 0.5% of projects around the world deliver to time, to time, to cost, and to benefits, then that's pretty lousy, right? So if we keep doing the same thing that we've been doing forever, then we're not going to achieve any better results, are we?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
so what that says to me is, we need to be as innovative and as flexible with putting teams of people together and doing work in offsite locations, doing work around the world. We need to be as flexible in that space as we are in building offsite concrete construction factories. There should be no artificial constraints to making this better. So my challenge to you, for example, would be, okay, 250 route kilometers of CBTC. That's an interesting job. That's a great job. 12 years. How do you not do it in 12 years? How do you do it in 4? Right? And it's that level of challenge that I think is required here, because the problems that you're identifying are absolutely right. Not everybody wants to live in Perth or anywhere else, frankly, for 12 years. So how do we come together to do it better? How do we do it better? And I think where Bent's going is maybe identifying the fact that there are different ways of tackling this problem, and that we should be open to thinking those through, and not just simply replicating the approaches that we've been using for the last 10, 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
It was I took a quick look at just as a way of kind of finishing this off. I took a quick look at one or two other lessons learnt, if you like, from other schemes, and Crossrails is clearly a big part of my life. I live in West London. I use it regularly, and I'm extremely grateful to the tens of thousands of people who worked hard to get that into service. But it was interesting reading Mark Wilde's comments about his lessons learned from his Crossrail experience, uh, and I'm guessing actually because Mark has now moved, or will now be moving to take over as chief exec at HS2. So it'll be interesting to see how those lessons then move across into the HS2 world. And the ones that really, I think, that were very similar to some of the things Bent was talking about was, his views about simplification and not accepting complication just for the sake of complication. So to try and break things down, to try and be really focused on getting down to a level of simplification, if you like, where you can actually understand clearly what's going on, and then being able to manage that. And that, I think, is quite akin to the idea of Bent's Lego. Let's be modular about this. Let's break something down to the point where we understand it.
Yeah.
But then the dichotomy, as you would say earlier, is he was also very strong on the idea of owning the whole. So getting people to be accountable for their part in delivering an outcome. Yeah. So we're not just building a railway, we're delivering an outcome for people. So let's own that outcome, and our project delivery approach is set to deliver the outcome. And I think that's again very, very similar to Bent's idea of start at the right and build left. And I think that those things are very, very good. So there's a lot of parallel thought, I think, going into people who have experience of leading really big programs, and some of the results of this academic research and the way the academic research is finding its way into reality. I think this book comes through. It's a long time since I've done a book review, but this really comes with my wholehearted endorsement. I think Bent and Dan have done a fantastic job. I think it's a good read. It really is a good read. It's not too technically challenging, and there will be some moments where people go, "Oh my God, yeah, I get that. Absolutely right." Comes with my wholehearted endorsement. Go out and buy a copy. The guy clearly needs the money, so the sooner the better for him.
The example you just mentioned with the delivery period, like can a 12-year rollout be done in 4, reminded me of a couple of things that I found in the book as well. One chapter was called Think Slow, Act Fast as a recipe for success. And by thinking that the planning process was meant, and then acting is the actual delivery, the actual implementation of a certain part of the project. And another term that I found in the book was the so-called window of doom, which is basically the period of time that a project delivery is exposed to events from the outside. And that can be completely unexpected black swan events, such as COVID, for example, a few years ago, or it can be a combination of multiple smaller, seemingly unsuspicious events that can lead to a major damage to the project delivery. So by keeping the actual delivery periods as this window of doom as short as possible, you do the best risk mitigation that you can by minimizing the potential impact of any external factors to the project delivery. So what I would hoping for is not just looking at the rollout period, say here in Perth again, of 10 years or 12 years, but actually breaking this down into longer periods of proper planning and then short bursts of implementation, very thought through, very well planned. Everything is clear on paper. It just has to be put in. Everything is in the right place, can be installed, tested relatively quickly, and then be done with it, and then go back to the planning desk, make improvements, and then implement quickly the next thing. So if this rollout period can be broken down like this, it could actually be in line with the recommendations of the book, and maybe the net delivery time would actually come down to maybe 4 years or something like that.
Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? I think you've hit on something that I think is worth, I hope people get a little bit inspired by that comment, because so often the projects seem to be that we end up working on projects are, let's start and then we'll work out what we're doing next.
Yeah.
Right. And under those circumstances, the things that you're talking about absolutely happen. you're working in delivery for much longer, therefore you're much more prone to risk. And risk is a killer. Risk brings cost up and it delays things even further. So, if you can plan and plan and plan and design and iterate and plan and plan and design and iterate, so that by the time you actually get to site, to real site, there are as few surprises as you could possibly imagine. And the real surprises that the COVID or the something else, that's a specific thing that you can manage as a one-off, but you're not routinely coming across surprises. You've modularized. You're doing as much of the build and the test off-site as you possibly can before you get anywhere near site. You've tested it to the nth degree before you go anywhere near site. It's almost like building I suppose what we know, and the analogy of house building. So I can go and watch people build a house, and they'll put foundations in, and then 6 weeks later they'll be, and the whole process takes forever. Or I build a house in a factory to a design that I know works in a controlled environment. I break that down, put it as jigsaw pieces on the back of a lorry, take it to site, and a week later I have a house. Okay, and I think that's kind of where we're trying to get to with this. Do as much as you can through the planning and the design, the development, and the build stage away from site to minimize the time that you need on site, and really allow yourself to minimize that window of doom, as you and Ben called it, the opportunity for those risks to knock you off course. So yeah, maybe we'll do 10 years of planning for CPTC in Perth, and then 2 years of rollout. That'll be the best job ever.
Yeah. Well, famous last words. Let's cross fingers that it works like this. Andy, I had a blast. This was just as good as I thought it would be. I hope the listeners like it as well. Thank you very much for your time. I know you've got lots of other things to do, so I let you go. Thank you, and I hope we can talk again soon about something else, or maybe some additional findings from the book here and there. Let's see.
Oh, Frank, it's always a blast. I really enjoy these. So thanks ever so much for making the time and the invitation. And I hope people enjoy this. I'd be really interested to get people's comments. I mean, this is it's a live subject for a lot of people. So please comment. Please get involved.
Yeah.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Hi, this is Doc Frank again. Before you head off, I just wanted to let you know again of the arguably best CBTC conference that has ever been held, the CBTC World Summit 2023, with 18 speakers from 13 different countries. It was a mega event in September this year, and you now have access to the official recording where you can see all the presentations, all the question and answers after the presentations, and even the VIP fireside chats that were exclusively for VIP attendees during the conference. But you can have all of this now lifelong on demand. You can watch it whenever you want, from wherever you want, and how often you want. Don't miss this opportunity and sign up to the best CBTC conference ever on docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. I repeat that, docfranktraining.podia.com/CBTC World Summit 2023. If you want one recommendation from me on CBTC, that is it. The best content of the year by a mile. Don't miss it. Hi, it's Doc Frank again. I hope you liked today's episode. I like to keep it as simple as possible, so I only have one single request for you. If you like this podcast, please tell your friends and colleagues about it. That's all I want, because that's a service that I'm providing to the industry, and I would like as many people as possible to listen to this podcast and learn something from it. So please share, and until next time, keep it simple, and bye for now. Thank you for listening.